Mark Cuban just admitted to illegal DEI hiring practices, and people like Tim Pool, Clay Travis, and a lot of other conservative pundits who were coming after Mark Cuban on Twitter are having a field day with this one, and rightfully so, because Mark Cuban is an absolute idiot, and he basically did just admit to illegal DEI hiring practices right on social media, and now he's kind of shutting down. And like I said, Tim Pool, Clay Travis, a lot of people are coming after him and having a field day with it. So let's check out what's going on here with Tim Pool and Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban continues to engage in Twitter fights on behalf of DEI. It's basically like Mark Cuban's the DEI PR team. Cuban has defended the hiring practice against everyone from Elon Musk to an anonymous account called The Rabbit Hole. On Monday, Cuban admitted that he uses diversity as a competitive advantage when hiring and not hiring job candidates. He is proud of said strategy. However, a commissioner for the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission notified Cuban via X that his hiring method violates the Title VII law. Mark Cuban, EEOC commissioner here, unfortunately, you're dead wrong on black letter Title VII law. As a general rule, race and sex can't even be a motivating factor, nor a plus factor, tiebreaker, or tipping point. It's important employers understand the ground rules here. Andrea R. Lucas commented below Cuban's post, competitive advantage equals a motivating factor. In other words, Cuban just admitted to an illegal hiring practice to his nearly 9 million followers. Here's Libs of TikTok's tweet about the whole thing. It says, Mark Cuban just casually admitted to breaking the law and his hiring practices. A commissioner for the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission set him straight. Mark Cuban opened himself up to endless lawsuits. DEI needs to be abolished. It's poison. And here's a few screenshots from Mark Cuban and Andrea R. Lucas. Here's Mark Cuban's tweet that says, I've never hired anyone based exclusively on race, gender, religion. I only ever hire the person that will put my business in the best position to succeed. Well, if that's the case, then what's the point in DEI? You know, like why is he so hard up on DEI is the greatest thing ever if you're just always going to hire the best person? It seems like very, very counterintuitive. And yes, race and gender can be part of the equation. How does that make any sense at all? I view diversity as a competitive advantage. Now, how would you propose finding organizations that give preference to white people? Why aren't you working as hard to show examples of white preference as you are DEI? You claim to abhor both. The issue here, DEI, is larger than Mark Cuban. DEI is entrenched in corporate America. Executives all across the country brag about it. There's a financial incentive to DEI. Investment firms like BlackRock and Vanguard judge companies based on their environmental, social, and governance scores, which primarily encourage companies to hire job candidates based on race. DEI is a win in the eyes of the press, Wall Street, and social settings. So Cuban is hardly the only executive that views diversity, meaning non-white people, as a competitive advantage, which is abhorrent, racist, and illegal. Yes, society will never defeat DEI in the court of public opinion. Racial sensitivity is too high. The only way to undo DEI measures is by way of legal action. Libs of TikTok is right. Until then, executives will continue to engage in what we call excused racism, the philosophy that society ought to racially discriminate against white people in order to reach racial impartiality. It's a myth that the likes of Mark Cuban uphold. So obviously, Tim Pool and, like I said, Clay Travis and the rest of them were all over Mark Cuban on Twitter. Here, Mark Cuban tweeted out this. He said, let's do an AMA, which is an Ask Me Anything, fire away. And of course, people like Tim Pool, The Rabbit Hole, etc. were all over this. Tim Pool asked Mark Cuban here, have you ever considered race or gender in any capacity for hiring, promotions, or contracting? And he quote tweeted that and said, hey, Mark Cuban, if you're serious about DEI hiring practices, please stand up for them and clarify specifically that you consider race and gender in hiring, promotions, and contracting. And he never responded to this. Obviously, Mark Cuban is completely shutting down on this issue because he realized that he's been doing something that's illegal and could open himself up to a lot of lawsuits. The Rabbit Hole also posted this in response to that Tim Pool tweet. Here is Mark Cuban saying, I've never hired anyone based exclusively on race, gender, or religion. I only ever hire the person that will put my business in the best position to succeed. And yes, race and gender can be part of the equation. I view diversity as a competitive advantage. And then there's this other tweet here. This Marcus Aurelius guy said, why wouldn't you hire based on diversity of background and not race? And Mark Cuban responded and said, race is part of the equation, never the deciding factor, as is diversity of background. So basically he's saying right there, race is part of the equation. He thinks that's completely fine. But we have another tweet from Tim Pool here with a screenshot of this person from the EEOC talking to Mark Cuban, saying, EEOC commissioner here, unfortunately, you're dead wrong on black letter Title VII law. As a general rule, race and sex can't even be a motivating factor, nor a plus factor, tiebreaker, or tipping point. It's important employers understand the ground rules here. And Mark Cuban said multiple multiple times on Twitter. We saw in those 2 tweets from the rabbit hole in response to that Tim Pool tweet that it is actually a motivating factor, that it's probably a huge factor for Mark Cuban when he's hiring people. At least that's what he says on Twitter. But I think he's basically just virtue signaling. I don't think he ever actually cared about, diversity, equity, inclusion. He doesn't care about any of this stuff. He just likes to virtue signal, because nobody gets to be a billionaire by hiring based on race and gender and sex. You do hire the best person for the job. That's how you're able to become a billionaire. You're not able to just hire anyone and have them, help you build $1 billion company or multiple companies that add up to $1 billion. It just doesn't happen like that. So I know for a fact that Mark Cuban's a businessman, and he's not actually following these practices. He's not actually following DEI. He just likes to sound good to his overlords, BlackRock and Vanguard, like everybody else is saying here. But Tim Pool also says stock in Cuban's companies are going to take a hit. This is massive legal exposure. This person, FloridaMan.eth, says Cuban said, "I'm not racist," then immediately revealed his racist business practices. You can't make this up. Like I said, man, it's all hypocrisy. It's all just virtue signaling. Mark Cuban has no interest in actually following these practices that are going to get these minorities hired, because he's a smart person. Like, he's not just going to hire people based on what color they are. He's going to hire people that's going to help him make more money, just like any other successful businessman out there would do. Let me know what you guys think about this whole Mark Cuban admitting to doing illegal hiring practices. Let me know what you think of this whole situation. What do you think about Tim Pool's responses and the fact that Mark Cuban refused to answer Tim Pool's question on Mark Cuban's AMA on Twitter? Let me know what you're thinking about this whole Tim Pool, Mark Cuban situation down in the comments.